Whoa, Jim Joyce. Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday, man. There's no big. I was waiting for the big Jim Joyce.
No, I think this is new in Zoom. It just said this meeting is being recorded.
Yeah, it's a
weird.
little kind of consenting us, double consent.
Huh. Well, there you go. Double consenting in. So, Jim Joyce.
Hey, Wednesday. We did it, man. We did it.
Did it. Another week, another, I don't know, another hump day. Wednesday. Wednesday. Love Wednesdays. We oh right. You know what? I'm gonna finish this bottle as well. Not today though.
You don't finish the whole bottle today. We got a little tipsy last week.
I did. It was kind of nice on a Wednesday. But I'm I know you just came back from US. I'm actually heading out Friday.
Awesome.
And I'm landing at JFK at 7:30 p.m. next morning. I think 10 or 10:30. I have an appointment for Pfizer vaccine. It's amazing. It's amazing. Really. Pick anyone within the location. Go anywhere. Amazing.
Yeah. They're killing it. They're killing it. Or they're doing a great job.
What else? Our friends at Akili. I don't know if you saw that. And again, I'm going to leave a lot of that to Matthew and Jess to dissect, but congrats. I know they've been added, another 160 million added to the bank to commercialize Endeavor RX and other things. So congrats to Eddie and team.
Off the hook.
Money
keeps flowing.
Keeps flowing. So, speaking of money, I don't know actually why I said that, but or somebody who I guess exited out of Propeller Health. So let's let Chris Hogg in.
I'm looking forward to this.
And by the way, I'm totally ready for New York, Saturday, New Jersey. So Saturdays, New York City. There you go. I actually just realized that I'm wearing this. So, Mr. Hogg.
Hey. How are you, Eugene? How are you? Hi, James.
Good. Did you
nice
guys
to meet you.
Met?
Don't believe so.
I don't think so. I definitely I've heard you speak, and I've followed you on your big Twitter streams. You did the dissection of a few kind of key.
Oh yeah,
some
of the S1s I was getting into. Yeah, I spend a little bit too much time on Twitter, probably.
Good stuff. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. You're taking a break. I just realized. I actually looked on your LinkedIn. It says like taking a break or something, right? Digital health. Enthusiast, evangelist. What did you call yourself?
Something. I'm not really sure. I'm a true believer, I guess.
Have been.
So we, after the acquisition of ResMed, I stuck around there for a while and did some transition, and then just sort of realized how burnt I was, honestly. And things, they're obviously in very good hands. They're a big commercial organization, and so I wound down over a period of time. And then I was gonna think about starting something. I'm not really good at not working, so I was quite afraid of this. And so I said, I'll do the summer, and that was last summer. And then, we're in pandemic. My kids are going back to school remote. I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do. I'm like, this is insane. And so I did some consulting and advising and just spent too much time on Twitter. It's been quite nice.
But I appreciate you taking the time, keeping busy here since you're off officially, right? Taking a break.
Yeah. This is the break.
For as I always say, for the millions of listeners that we have, maybe give like your, I don't know, a minute of your background, and then we'll sort of jump in. I have a gazillion questions, even though we go way back already, Jim.
Yeah, awesome.
We're going to fight, Jim. We're going to fight for the question time.
Love it.
So, I did some stuff before, like biology and investment banking and pharma. And then for the last 10 years, I've been in digital health pretty much all full time. So I started a little company back in 2011 called 100 Plus that was like an early behavior change and engagement app. That was very steep learning curve.
I think that's when we crossed paths under this
Definitely.
Quantified Self with Maarten de Braber and many others.
Yeah. Maarten, yeah. And that was great. I didn't really know what I was doing, but that was my first foray into tech. And the big problem there is, I learned over many years is it's really good to know like who wants to buy your thing and why and for how much. And back then it was, we're going to build this stuff and people are going to come and it's going to be great. and that didn't really work out. And then so I rolled that into Practice Fusion, and I was there for a little bit and started a data group there, which was super fun. I mean, it was just a mountain of data that we got to play around with and try to figure things out with. And then most recently, I had the great opportunity to join Propeller about 7 years ago now. I had known David Van Sickle, the co-founder, for a while. We'd been friends, and I got to meet that team, and they're based in Madison. So I was able to start a San Francisco office and do kind of the things that I was COO at that time. And it was kind of the things that were good in the Bay Area. So I started a product group and a design group. We spun up, more of an acquisition consumer marketing group, data science, and it was great. I got to move around and ended up there as chief commercial officer the last couple of years. So it was just out, pitching a lot. Pharma, we sold to pharma, we sold to payers, IDNs, PBMs, man, you name it. We kind of ran the gamut.
So it's the commercial role that burnt you out, not the operating role.
No, I think it wasn't burned out. I love this stuff. It was just, I look back and it was, it was a 10-year grind, really.
By the way, I can hear you guys. I'm not walking out on you, but my younger daughter locked herself out on the balcony, so I can hear you. This is the first time. This is the first ever.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a 10-year grind. It was funny. I left my nice pharma job and I was going to start this company back in 2011, and then everything was going to happen so fast. We're going to tech transform healthcare, and 10 years later, it was like, wow, that was like a long slog. But it was just great.
Chris, where were you in pharma? What was your?
Oh, so I did. So I worked for a little company called CB Therapeutics, and then we got bought by Gilead, and so I was at Gilead. And so I did like new product planning and commercial strategy. So I got to oversee like the cardiovascular and respiratory stuff that we were doing, which was great because I got to focus on the future. So I did a lot of market research and analysis and kind of try to figure out what docs are doing and why. It was a great job.
Yeah, and so you left that you jumped out to start 100+ from that job.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, pharma guy to tech entrepreneur. It was a rough transition.
What was the impetus, right? Like what triggered? I mean, I think that quantified self movement was just sort of birthing, right?
Yeah.
But like, was there like a hypothesis that you had? Like, shit, if we can get people to change their behavior, like based on this data, what was it?
Yeah, I mean, that was it. So I was really involved in the quantified self group back then. That was one of the best things that's happened to me. Gary Wolf's still a good friend of mine. And, I got really lucky to get introduced to that group really early. Like I wasn't at the first meeting or two, but still when it was like very small in San Francisco. And so you had, just this group of super intense and really interesting people that were very, very passionate about this, concept that we could measure ourselves and change behavior from it and do all sorts of cool things. And then that kind of expanded, and you start to think about, obvious stuff, but like, wow, we're gonna, back then it was sort of novel. This is, 2009, 10 or something, but we're going to have all this data from people, and it's going to overlay with EMR data, which is really punctuated, and that's going to give us a much more robust picture of people, and we should be able to do really cool things with that. And that was sort of the general hypothesis. And then I had this other angle, which was, consumer tech at that time. Everything was being techified, and there was a lot of good knowledge around engagement and how to enroll people and how to iterate. And so I had combined those two things and was like, we're going to do high design. It's going to be really engaging. We're going to help people do small things in their health, in their life, and not focus on like these big things, and just overall try to make people healthier. It was very much, health prevention. And we ended up doing like corporate wellness stuff.
I just remember for some reason, as you were talking about quantified self, Gary Wolf, I remember one of the early, maybe it was 2012, the quantified self meetup in Amsterdam. I was just, I think, moving there or just moved there. And what struck me at that meetup, I remember there was a guy that presented like a piece of artwork that was his color of his pee, day by day. And I forget, like either 30 days or 60 days or even more, correlating to what, time of the day was. And I was just like fascinated. That's all I remember from that meeting.
Right. It was super fast. There was another woman, I can't remember her name, but she was making art out of like tracker data and visualizing, and it was just amazing. So it was a really creative group of people, and it was just, idea. And then at the same time, right, there was the early Health 2.0 movement, Matt Holt and Indu were doing, and then there was these conferences, and then there were unconferences around that and meetups. So San Francisco, the Bay Area at that time was just hopping. And so while I was in pharma, I was, I didn't have kids yet, and so I was out doing, I was at meetups probably twice a week, You know, at that
Really?
time,
That's
just
it?
like networking. Yeah, I was doing tech meetups. I was
Okay.
doing like QS, Health 2.0. It was a lot, but it was so interesting.
And so 100 plus, what was the basic concept for 100 plus?
Yeah, that we were going to help people engage with small, healthy things in their daily life. So we were trying to build like habits around small things, like walking a little further every day, park farther away, walk, get off the bus earlier, drink water. And we would recommend these things we called HOPs, health opportunities, to people. And when they would do them. And then the game mechanic was a longevity calculator. So we were dynamically creating a life score. That's why it was 100 plus. The goal was to increase. And it was trying to people, it's really hard for people to do small things today that have like a long-term impact. So we were trying to close the loop on that.
Awesome. And where'd you go?
So you were the same, like BJ Fogg was doing quite a lot. Was he doing the tiny habits then also? I'm trying to remember the timeline. Yeah, it was, right?
Yeah,
like,
I can't remember when he got real popular, but yeah, for sure. Like everybody was talking about BJ Fogg and QS and the Health 2.0 group then. And so we were definitely, in thinking about that model. There was a lot going on about, behavior hooks for health. And we just figured, if we could change behavior, that's like such a core to everything. And then, a lot of things were going to happen from that.
What do you
Jim, you were asking something?
No, I'm fascinated, but I'll let Eugene. What do you still love about 100 plus? Like if you were to think about that, is there still aspects of the idea, concept that you love? It lived on in Practice Fusion.
It did for a little bit. A lot of what we were doing, so we had been using a bunch of government data and Practice Fusion data to model this life score. So the innards definitely became, because some of the way we were structuring data and things that persisted. But now the front end really, really didn't. There's always hopes that, you think it's going to all just get used, but it's much trickier, in practice. But there's definitely things about that I love. Like, I think the ethos of it was correct. We were very like individual focused, really trying to figure out like what individuals needed and how to engage them. We spent a lot of time on design and the way it looked and felt. And I still believe, very strongly in like high design. The problem is it was like, it should have been in a trophy case or a little case, like it was like a art object or something, but it wasn't. Like we didn't launch quick, we didn't iterate, we just thought about it too much. So I have many more learnings about things we did incorrectly, but there were definitely some like fundamental things that I think were great. I think we did well at the branding and the messaging and kind of how we talked about it, and that was really fun.
Yeah. I would build off of this. So you've had you went from Gilead, then you do 100 plus, and then you're in Practice Fusion, and then you've had this like Propeller, we'll go into this Propeller ResMed, but like this whole kind of integrating between corporate and entrepreneurs. Where's your head at right now? Because this is Eugene's thing.
Oh, I
always recovering from something, right? But always recovering from something.
Yeah, no, I'm not a recovering entrepreneur yet. That's sure. I am definitely more of a small company person. I am enamored with like the blank piece of paper. I like when that spot when sort of everything is possible, and we can just, really try to envision stuff. As things get bigger and more structured, what I did learn at Propeller was like that became a really fun process too. It's, there's a lot of cliches written, but definitely I've had that evolution where my brain's gone from like, the focus on the product to the team, how does the team work that build, and then it's like the company, like how do we build the machine that makes the machine? And so now I'm like super fascinated and stuff and things like that. And so I'm definitely on the entrepreneur side. I'm definitely, thinking about doing another company, sort of a disease, you get infected and, but it's just so much fun that beginning stages, when, I don't know, it's just open, there's so much possibility.
It's actually interesting to me, right? Because you spent time as a chief operating officer, right? So it's like, to me, not that you can do both, right? But it's like, operating and standardizing, right? Versus the blank piece of paper, right? I just find that pretty interesting.
COO is kind of a funny title, right? So I would say that I'm not really an ops person, but it was like a big enough title, and I got to run product and some other things. But we had an ops person on the senior who's like, great at that. And so I always need that counterpart for sure. I like to be up here, and then I love to partner with the people who just like love to keep the trains running on time.
And what was your again, I actually don't truly know the story of Propeller and you coming into Propeller. Like, could you join a little bit late? I mean, probably one of the first employees, but yeah.
No, I was probably, I think I forget, I was in like the 20s or maybe 30. And so the company had actually been around for about 4 years. So I had known, so David Van Sickle he was the co-founder and the CEO. And so he's a respiratory epidemiologist by training. And so he, like, it was total like passion, like tired and frustrated with the data on where asthma and respiratory disease was happening in the community. And so started tinkering and building sensors in a lab as a postdoc and slapping them on people's inhalers to try to track like what was happening. And that obviously turned out to be a valuable signal. And they spun it into a company around 2010 in Madison. But I had met David right around then because there weren't a lot of companies starting. And so you kind of knew back then, it was Asthmapolis. And I had met him at this like super geeky, awesome conference called Health Data Palooza that you might have gone to in DC, which was great. And we had just stayed in touch. And so when I was thinking about, joining, they were probably about 30 people. And I came in and only in Madison. There's a couple people in San Francisco, but we didn't have an office. And so then the opportunity arose, they had been thinking about expanding and they were thinking about, holes that they had, maybe around product and design and marketing and brand and that sort of stuff that I was sort of real passionate about then.
Okay. Before we go anywhere, tell me about Madison, Wisconsin. What's going on there?
So I love Madison. So I had never been there, but obviously got to spend a lot of time there. It is an incredible city. It's a college town. There's a big university there. It's in between these two lakes. So it's visually like beautiful with a Capitol right in the middle of it. Just like a really good vibe, good, restaurants and, it was fun. Winter, super duper cold. It gets really, really cold. I had lived a little bit in Chicago, so I was a little bit okay, but yeah, it's California folks, man. They would, when we had to go there during the winter, it was really cold.
Whenever I've met
it's
the guys,
a beautiful city.
I've met some of you, the other founders, and I've met, the ResMed guy as well. And they always talked about Madison, Wisconsin, and I was always like fascinated. They were totally committed to building the company there, weren't they?
Oh yeah, and it was great. Honestly, one of the things that drew me to Propeller was the fact that it was out there and not in Silicon Valley. It felt different at that time. Mid 2014, there was it's kind of like now, but there was a lot of like tech stuff happening here and tech culture and some of what we call now like bro culture and things like that out here, and it just felt different. And so I definitely liked that. It was slightly older crew. We had been around a little bit. Everyone had families. It was more methodical. There was, I think a little bit more discipline maybe around like decision making. So we weren't like scrambling all the time. We were definitely scrambling, but not maybe all the time. It was great out there.
Because there's just so much to unpack on what's happening now. And again, back to Jim's comment, like you're very vocal and thorough, not just with the S1 analysis, but et cetera. But I want to actually dive a little bit deeper on Propeller, right? Because it was a journey. And, for the entrepreneurs that are watching, like what were some of the big gotchas that you guys stumbled there, right? So we're talking about 100 plus a little bit, but like Propeller, again, making, what the hell was a GTX at the time or et cetera. Just any kind of, at least high level.
Oh man, there were so many. I mean, I think the biggest challenge is timing, right? And so when you're really early at stuff, there's just so many boulders to push up the hill, and because you're trying to change, different people's behavior. You're trying to, physicians to do something different, use data differently, and then how to get paid. I think the one main thing, the piece of advice that I give is that we all started in the right place. We started in the wrong place. It was, we have all this technology. This is like back in 2010. And what can we do with the technology, right? Then I think we got smart and everyone's like, okay, no, it's about solving problems. Like, let's focus on the patient. We're going to solve patient problems. And that was good. I think the later is, man, the capture, I think digital health creates a lot of value, and I think Propeller did, and I think we didn't capture as much as, digital health has created. And so the advice I give now is like really focus on the value capture. So what is the go-to-market motion? How are people, how are patients coming in? How are you getting paid? Is it structured? Is it a new contract? Is it new? What are the incentives? Really kind of basic stuff actually, we talk about, but I think there's a lot of focus on that now. And I almost, start there and then work backwards. What's the problem we want to solve? How is this like market motion, go-to-market motion going to work? And then how do we like build into it? Because I think that's where most have failed. And so we did that. And we were just contracting. We would just go in and pitch, because there's not like reimbursement codes. There's not like a normal motion yet. There's not even labels, right? So I remember back in the day, like getting together with groups, and we would talk like, what do we call this? What do we call these things? Like, what is the definition of a digital therapeutic now that that name is starting to get some traction? And so that was like really helpful and good. I think when you're new, you have to band together and do it. But I think, I think a bunch of things we did well is we were nimble. I think we optimized for like learning. We didn't believe our beliefs too much, if that makes any sense. Like there weren't hills that we were going to like die on, one of the things that we can talk about, like I worry about like the prescription digital therapeutic track. Like it seems so narrow in focus to me that if that one rail doesn't work out, like what? Like I think one of the things we did well was like, I don't know. Yeah, we want to be on remote patient monitoring. Sure. We're digital therapeutic. Yeah, we're in that one too. And then we can sell to these guys. We can sell this way. Right. And that flexibility, I think, helped us kind of craft contracts or ways that were amenable to our partners and things like that.
I used to say when I was teaching people how to sell, not that I know how to do anything about doing that, but I would say if that what you do is you figure out, like I was always selling, my company, I had a device company as well. But, figure out, I was selling into pharma. So figure out what pharma was paying for and make yourself look like that. That was so it was kind of pretty simple. Just look like what they're paying for.
That's like another great learning. Like there's like absolute cultural things. Like you have to look and sound like they do, or it's very scary, especially pharma. We did a lot with pharma. And I think one of the reasons we were successful there, one is, the product is very tightly bound to medicines. So there's a obvious logic to it. But the other is I had very luckily, brought in an old friend that I'd worked with at Gilead, who had been doing corp dev at Gilead to help run our pharma biz. And between the two of us, we had worked in pharma. And we got this feedback a lot. Like we were able to make these big companies comfortable that we could get them through MLR, med, legal, regulatory. We knew kind of how it worked. We knew where the third rails were. We didn't say words that make people, scare words. And I think that just like, it helped a lot. And so, and then, in the payer side too, like bringing in people that really knew that, I think that's like super duper important. And advice that I give to people like, hey, we're going to go, sell to pharma. I'm like, great. You have to hire somebody or have like a great advisor comes out of pharma.
Familiarity, right, and is key to the behavior. Like if something is familiar, then it's already friendly. It's funny, just not to bore our listeners, but I had to pick up with Shane, my younger one, the residency card, and we didn't have an appointment, but because we're flying Friday, and so we have to go to the National Police Station, and there's a line, and of course, like kind of like, oh, remember you. To the police guy, I said, oh, remember I was here last week, right? And he's like, oh, yeah, right? And like, I showed the appointment from the other week. No problem, go in. And my daughter asked, like, why did you say, that you remember me? Because they probably won't. Familiarity.
Yeah. And we did, we were able to look and feel, we tried as hard as we could to feel like our partners. And then, it ends up like co-development, nobody knows what it is. And so co-development's got a bad word, but definitely there's like give and take, like, all right, this is what we have and what we want to do. And then we have to kind of mold it to do that. But that was, very fun. We had great partners, you end up in successful deals. Like now I guess I have enough that I can look back, like every single deal I can look back that was successful, there's like a key champion or two that you look at and you're like, man, that person was either going to get promoted or fired based on this deal. That it was incredible, like what they did to support
I think none of us want to accept the fact that so many of our deals, investment, insights, even early team building hangs off of one person, the right time, making a decision or backing you, like that, all this like serendipitous activity that goes on, but it's like some champion just goes, geez, I believe in this guy, Chris, or who's coming.
And then the knife cuts both ways, because then we've had team turnover and then it's bad, right? You have these strong champions, this team, and then there's like one of them, they got promoted. They went to go run a country and you're like, oh man. like good for them, but oh man.
Yeah, I think, Eugene does another podcast, and you're always very politically correct about this, Eugene, but with the pharma, with the pharma team, like I consider him like NFL.
Am I politically correct?
No, I'm teasing you. I was trying to trigger you. I was trying to trigger you.
Sorry, I didn't pick up the joke today, but
I was triggering you. But they're like NFL football players. They get a 3.5-year lifespan, max in their role if they even make the team. And so you got to be thinking about them that way. You're going, as the outside vendor, you're going to be there much longer than the person you're talking to is going to in that position. And so
like startups that like still to this day reach out and say, well, we're working, or how do we work with company X? And I'm like, you don't work with company X. You work with a person, you're champion or not a champion at company X. And tomorrow they're going to be at company Y, right? And so it's still at the end of the day, relationship building, trust building, and the logo will change from one to the other. You got me triggered, man.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
Chris, I would love to hear your feeling, and sorry, Eugene, cut me off. But I'd love to so one of the things about Propeller, and I'm not interested in digging into anything you can't say, about the organization, but when it hit scale, when it started to scale a bit, was there any kind of epiphanies or moment or like, oh shit, this is actually working kind of moments? And then when, with the big, acquisition, that was obviously one of the most, we had My Sugar on last week. Like the Propeller acquisition was obviously a seminal event. What did it feel like to be there?
So I did it. I don't know that there were definitely moments. I can't say that there were ever like times when we sort of sat back and you're like, oh, this is getting easy. It was never easy. And I think that's like an important lesson. I think all the companies you look at from the outside, who are like growing like mad, Hims, Roman, oh man, it must be easy. I'm like, I don't know. I think the bigger it gets, just the harder it gets. So I would say that
bigger money, bigger problems.
It's absolutely right. And so I think it was always, a challenge to do it, but definitely there were times when we started to see things click in and we're like, oh, that feels different. Like one example, like we had been all B2B2C, we were helping pioneer this B2B2C route through different vendors. And we had done one program. It was a grant funded program in Louisville, Kentucky. That was still one of the best things I've probably worked on, called Air Louisville. And it was a grant funded program by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And so we were supposed to go down there and get lists from everybody, Humana, Passport, Norton, everyone down there. And I remember these meetings, we went down there and they're like, great, we'll look at it as like a referral. Like, how much are you guys going to pay us for a referral? And we're like, no, this is a disease management program. You guys are paying us. And they're like, yeah, no. And so out of necessity, we went back and started figuring out how to do Facebook advertising and acquisition online. And literally me and a product manager was so Bush League, but we're like watching tutorials and reading things online and just spinning things up. And it was great. And that was one where all of a sudden that started to work, right? And oh man, we're going to make this program successful. Like we can totally do this. I remember the first patient who got all the way through from a Facebook ad to a syncing user with no human intervention. We're like, oh, and we probably paid like $3,000 for that patient, but and then it starts getting down and down, and you're like, actually, this is like reasonable. And funny enough, like we started acquiring people, doing press, all of them came back and ended up as partners, and there's like moments like that where you're like, man, that was like, we snatched victory out of defeat there. And then that became a great tool for us that we leveraged excessively, especially with pharma, that our ability to acquire people. And so you have these like moments or finally seeing, clinics start to come on, and like doctors, one of our early users was a doc named Dr. Merchant at Dignity. He did one of our first studies, and watching this, going up to see his practice and watching a doc actually transform how they care because they're using your data so much, changing how they schedule visits, because I don't need to see everybody. I'm just going to fill in my schedule with these people. I mean, you're like, okay. Awesome. So you have these like signs of life, even if it's not scaling, you're like unit positive. I know this can work, and those were like the key moments. It was less about like, ooh, we can just go out and it like scales. It was like these units that you get to work and you're like, okay, it's possible now, because a lot of what we work in is like impossible or possible, not like possible or scale, right? And so you're looking for like possible. And those are the moments that I really remember the most as like, oh yeah, because we used to say it like, we celebrate, like wins do not come easily. And so when we got a big deal and we enrolled thousands of people in a couple of months for a pharma company, because we had been practicing at doing it, you know, like that was like, okay, but those were hard fought, you know. And so
have you guys ever
enjoy
seen
them.
that startup cartoon that basically says F F F F F F F F F F woohoo F F F F F F woohoo?
Yeah, it's
So
pretty much, you know, and you have to, that's the grind though. You have to just be in for that ride and then celebrate those things. And one of the things we used to say at Propeller, which is so true, like nothing came easy to us, I think. And so every win was like awesome, you know, like everything that we did, you know, you're like, wow, we like earned that one. And so then you asked about ResMed. I mean, that was an excellent experience. You know, we met them. It made a lot of sense. You know, ResMed is obviously very big in sleep apnea. Years ago, they had to start, payers wanted proof that people were using CPAP. So they ended up with putting cell chips in all of their CPAP. So they ended up with like a huge connected device fleet out there and all the data coming in. And they also had a COPD business focused on like portable oxygen and ventilators. And so when they were thinking about expanding respiratory, it was clear to them, like they had seen it, you know, it has to be connected, obviously, you know, that's our future. And so that's how we met. And it was through partnership because we were kind of doing COPD, maybe a little less severe patients, and they had more severe, and it just fit. All the conversations were good. The vibe was really good. Everything, you know, in a deal, things can go awry. Everything they said was true and like came to fruition. You know, it was just great. And then the deal went down, and we were just so like happy. We felt like it was a really good home for the company. We felt like they could do a lot with it. The people still feel good. And then, like you said, back then there weren't a lot of wins, and so we just felt like we felt great about it. You know, that we had kind of brought it there and didn't run it into the ground, frankly. You know, we were able to make something that people found valuable. Our investors made some money, you know, it was great.
How long did you stick around, by the way, after the sale?
About a year and a half.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, about a year and a half. And then it was kind of interesting. I had decided to leave. I wound down over, you know, a number of months, but that was pre-COVID. And then, you know, so just sort of like watch the country descend into pandemic. Was a super interesting experience.
Yeah.
So I'm like wondering what I'm going to do.
ResMed's amazing, like you said. Like I remember finding out, you know, we know the guys. They have a base in Dublin here, and they have the highest number of connected. You know, like if you look at them as a digital health, you know, because
they're the biggest, I think.
They're the biggest, but you know, and obviously they've done phenomenally well. Their stock prices performed excellently. Another buddy of ours, Connor Hanley, sold
Connor Hanley, right? That's right.
Well,
that's right.
From Bianca Med, you know, going back, so we know them well. But they're huge. They're kind of under the hood, you know, kind of. They're public.
They get
and
it though.
public.
They definitely get it for sure.
Yeah.
You know, because and part of it's through this experience. You know, they had to solve it, and then did, and it was sort of, you know, the epiphany that that's going to be the way things are, which is obvious to us.
So let's get to now, man. I don't know. I guess Legoizing healthcare.
Yeah.
Like I think I saw you use that term, or I don't know, but I love that concept. So maybe just to like our millions of listeners, your thoughts on it, putting together, because even I think some of the ideas, I know we talked, you know, separately, some of your ideas are like, well, you can stitch some stuff together into a health service in like 3 months. And I'm exaggerating, but
yeah, I say that to like product people and their eyes bug out. I'm like, all right, well, maybe not 3 months. No, so I think, I mean, right now for sure is the most interesting time, other than maybe, you know, when I was first jumping in 2010, like the euphoria and optimism back then was something I had never experienced in my life or career for sure. And it's getting to that level again now. And I think there's a bunch of things going on. One is this ecosystem. Right. So all of a sudden there are like legit tools out there and legit services that didn't really exist before. And so when you start thinking about even testing something, you know, when you start looking at it and you're like, man, that's like an 18-month build and we have to do all of the stuff. It's like a really good example. We are, you know, Propeller was a sensor that went on medicines. clearly the whole time I was there, we were talking about how do we get it with the medicine? Can we co-package it? Can we do something? We talked about going to FDA and getting a new NDC for a co-packaged version. We talked to pharmacies about maybe doing it. We ended up, we just launched or announced, we did it with Novartis in Europe, where they launched a new medicine with a co-packaged sensor in it as an offering. But that took, years, right?
Right.
And so, but now, now you would look at it and you're like, wow, Truepill. Or PillPack is doing, like, wow, like I can go talk to these people and do this. And then, there's Wheel. It's like, if I want to spin something up really, really quickly, I can get docs going on a cash pay, or, there's all sorts of good stuff. And, you coach, right? There's all sorts of these, like,
you keep sending us the wheel.com for health coaches.
I know, man. I think it's a great idea. I still do. But there's all these like infrastructure things, and I think you can start to then, the magic then becomes in how you stitch together these pieces into something that's like seamless and elegant. And then again, I think the differentiation comes obviously from the patient experience, the product, and the physician experience, because now you have them as your users also. But really, it's like the go-to-market, like who are you selecting, how are you doing it, how are you getting paid? I think that's where the innovation now and the interesting kind of experiments are going to come, in my opinion.
And how do you feel about all the capital flowing at it, and how are you feeling about that?
I love it. I mean, honestly, like, yeah, for sure, not everything will succeed, but the tide definitely lifts all boats. And consolidation is not a bad thing, right? So in the future, what it's going to do is there's all this money and there's going to be consolidation. So I think if you're a new company, that means there's acquirers and maybe places to land. And if you can get bigger faster, then I think with all this money coming in, it's sort of a race, right? Who's going to become the big fish and eat the little fish, and who's going to be the little fish getting eaten by the big fish? And so obviously everyone's racing to become a big fish as quick as possible, because feeding
and everybody wants to be the front door to health or healthcare, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's smart, right? I think if you control growth, if you control your growth lever, and you control acquisition and patient acquisition, and have some trust, like it gives you a lot of power and influence. And I think now, the other things, obviously the big changes, for me, one of the most interesting things for me is like home measurement. We can just do so much in the home now with home labs or devices that, sort of silly if you think about how we manage chronic disease. We make people truck all over town. It's like obvious statements. We can do that. And then COVID, like, it's just crazy timing. I feel like the luckiest dude on earth. I'm like, I finished up this arc, and was sort of like, what am I going to do next? And I'm still into it yet. We made a long time before mentioning it. But
actually, you mentioned it before, but we kind of like, I think we were sort of done with.
No, but I don't look at it as the end all be all, but for sure it's transformative. It's like it's like a chemical reaction, right? It's a total real catalyst. Got people over the activation energy of doing it, and in some of these policy changes. But I'm like the luckiest dude on earth, right? I'm like figuring out like what I want to do. I'm thinking a lot about virtual care before COVID, and then COVID happens and kicks everybody through the door. I'm like, wow, rather be lucky than good sometimes.
Right.
So
right.
I actually on one side I love the comment tide lifts all the boats, right? On the other, I'm struggling with some of the valuations. Honestly,
they're crazy.
I just think about even I don't know. I'll pick at Noom, $540 million. I mean, that's a lot of Google ads, and that's I'm just trying to figure out what your thoughts are on these valuations. Honestly,
I think I don't understand anything anymore, right? So like valuations of like everything, I don't understand. Whether it's home prices or anything. So I think there's like something there's something weird in the world, right? But I don't know. I think over time it's kind of funny. One of the places I had to like relearn. So when I came out of pharma, pharma's there's no iteration possible, right? So you think everything out for the next 20 years and like try to get every detail right. Then you have to like do the opposite when you become an entrepreneur, right? And so I think about things sort of in this framework. That is a problem for the future and not for today. And today, what it means is that there's like a lot of money coming in, which means there's a lot of innovation. A lot of these are going to tool providers that maybe I can use, and that's awesome. And we will solve the valuation crunch problem in the future. because I don't know how that's going to work out. And so I'm not even going to like worry about it today. I have to, for me, like you got to get a company up and running before you can, run it, before something like that can influence it. The one negative though,
valuation is not the problem of today.
It's not today's problem. And so, but the one big problem I do see is that, and this was the same as 2010 and 11, it's so easy to raise money now that you're going to run into a problem of concentration of talent. And so all the best people, like if you're great, you can go raise money, you can go raise a seed. And so instead of coming to work with me or with someone else on this other hard problem, you're going to have a bifurcation of awesome people. Because ideally, if you're starting a company, you want to hire a bunch of people who could probably start their own companies if they wanted to, but want to collapse on a specific problem and really solve it. So that will be a problem.
I feel like you're in San Francisco right now, Chris, are you? Or
yeah, East Bay, the Bay Area. Mm-hmm.
East Bay, because I feel like that perspective is it's kind of a California, or it could be a Boston perspective around that talent. Because I don't know, from Barcelona and from the locations you've been in Amsterdam, Eugene, and I'm based here in Dublin, that perspective of like, the capital is going to go to that location. It feels like, I'm saying this in a derogatory way, but it feels a very West Coast, because there's so much competition for talent in those areas. But like in Madison, you're going to work for Propeller, right? Because they're awesome guys and you know them, and it just like, I'm just wondering how this is going to play out. That will those innovations, is that capital just a fundamental? Are they going to come out of San Fran, right?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and probably I'm definitely Bay Area focused, so probably have a little myopia there. But I've definitely talked to people, and it's not just even founders. You're trying to pull out a crazy awesome head of product out of one company, and in a normal market, they might be in a company that's sort of sideways and they would be really interested in jumping onto something new. Or you're in a market where like, no, they're just about to go do a 20 million A because everyone's investing in this stuff, and the odds of you pulling that person out are very low then, or much lower.
I feel like a total,
and that could be anywhere.
I would watch people like, when I was growing up, we had, what was the kind of depression babies we had growing up, and update myself, where they would cut the stamps off the envelopes, to save the money, from meaning they wouldn't.
Sorry, Jim, you're dating yourself. I have no idea what you're talking about, man.
There's no depression babies and there's no stamps anymore. But the
right.
What's the stamp?
But just the people that grew up kind of having left Europe and came to America, and they were so good at pinching pennies, and there's no pennies anymore, it's Bitcoin too. But
right.
But they were so good at it. Like, I feel like as an entrepreneur, that's what I feel like, is like, it's like if you threw that much capital like at me, you know what I mean? It's just like, I would still have all my cheap habits. I would still have all my cheap habits.
I'm just calling these crazy numbers. I was talking to a VC earlier today, and I just kind of call it the Tiger Global squeeze, right? I mean, it's insane. They're just pouring money, and I just saw. I think we might have even talked about it last week. It's like they did a seed round.
Yeah, they're all over the place. It's not. It's definitely Tiger, but like, look at the size of all of these funds. When you have $2 billion under management, like doing a bunch of $5 million seeds doesn't really get you very far. And so they need, it's definitely the VC paradox. Like, for sure, I am a big believer that like not every company should be a VC company. That is for sure. And a guy, I've known and followed for a long time named Bryce Roberts, started trying to do, indie VC and like alternative stuff. And I think we'll see a ton of new models about how to fund these things. But yeah, if you're going VC, like for sure, they want to know that they can put $100 million in, right? Because that's how they get their return on these big funds. And so there is a bit, I heard this the other day, and I'll use it wrong, but they're like, they're like, foie gras, like it's being force fed, in capital, and it's going to be dangerous. And so for sure, there's going to be a bunch of blow ups and failure. I do hope though that, like,
I just see a bunch of turkeys blowing up now. Sorry for the
but
animal
it's
lovers.
personal. I think that ends up coming down to the entrepreneur. Like, just because you have a lot of money in the bank doesn't mean you have to spend it. I guess there's a ton of pressure, and maybe that's like Pollyannish and idealistic.
But they're kind of gearing, like, and I just wonder, and maybe now's the time, Chris, but like, I think about, like, keep referencing, like these companies take a while. Like, look at the Propeller story, right? It took a while to incubate. It took a while, like, I remember hearing, I don't know if it was you on stage or someone talking about, well, we spent so long trying to get the device right. And then we found out afterwards that it turned out the device was the easiest part of it, and I remember, I think I heard that from one of either you or one of your members. But it just takes a while, right? Like, it's just like getting the device, getting the consumer, getting the distribution, getting the machine going. And you're tackling so much.
It's a decade journey to build any business, really.
And this was definitely, so this was the problem, the first round, 2011, 12, there was a ton of seeds at that time from healthcare and tech and consumer VCs, there was a mix. And that was a real problem because you're giving these companies, $1.5 million back then, clearly not enough to get to, a trial. And I messed up all sorts of stuff at 100 Plus. So this is, on me, not the investor. But I remember this meeting with an investor for the A, and it was like, well, what studies do you have? Like, what data do you have to prove? And I'm like, I had $1 million. Like, maybe it's unrealistic. I don't think that's like a reasonable question though, on this, granted, I like messed up a bunch of stuff, but still, like, I don't know. And so I think there's, I think, you have to raise like a certain amount of money to I think, you spend a lot of time on like, what are your milestones? Where do you need to get to? And then how much money does that cost? And I think there's enough capital out there that if you have that like good story, that's like, no, I need to go 2 years in and build it, deploy it, study it, and that's going to cost X million. I think there's just much more willing check writers if they know where the money's going to go.
Right.
So are we getting to the Jim Joyce question? I'm just looking at the time. I think so. I think, and it was a good lead in.
This is a good, like, kind of meta question, because it sounds like you're itching to do something or get back into the fight, Chris. So the question, so if you were talking to a person who just left an exit from a digital health company and took some time off as a consultant and a Twitter expert, and you're going to give them advice as to how to start up a digital healthcare company, what would be the advice you'd give them?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. I've thought about this a little bit, So I'm definitely all about virtual care models, and so I would think about specific patient populations. I'm really interested in things that are targeting specific patient populations that might have been under-addressed or through primary care, like not addressed enough, and focus on it. Look at the ecosystem, like what do you really need to build, and then focus on the go-to-market. There are more motions out there than people think. There's clearly B2B to C, employer or payer, and I would think a lot, there's going to be lines out the door for these people. So like, what's different and how are you going to move up? There's obviously a cash pay growing market now for very specific, indications and uses. And then now with COVID and post-COVID and the ability for, I think telemedicine reimbursement will stay. Yeah, not too bad, only 2 or 3 mentions. But it's about, there's like all this interesting stuff about being an in-network provider that people are exploring, and ability to build there. So I would think about that. What group are you really interested in, and what's missing, and then what's the go-to-market motion, and let that kind of work backwards towards what you do, and then use the ecosystem to get something out quick and start iterating and learning. Don't think it out too much and try to go into a hole and figure it all out. That was probably the biggest learning from Propeller. And one of the things I'm like most proud of is that we had this philosophy that, like, what if we don't know? What if we don't know what patients really want and what doctors need? And so we ended up kind of building the chassis and building the thing to learn quickly. Like even our app was designed so that we could like change content and bring new things in and iterate. And I think that was, and philosophically as a company, that was, what David and Greg, the co-founders, really brought. Like, no, we think that, we don't know that. And even if we knew it in the past, do we know it now? And they just kept that sort of like, we have to keep learning. We have to keep learning. David had this great expression, that I use now, we just have to trust our future selves to be smarter than our current selves. Basically like we'll figure that out in the future. And so those are the things that I would focus on.
I love it.
And I would just say, do it. I would just say, do it, man. This is a great time. This is unbelievable. We're just super lucky to be sort of in our careers and have some experience at this moment in time. I think is just luck of the draw. And so capitalize.
We call it the new euphoria of digital health.
Yeah, something. It's definitely something. I think about I forget which Gladwell book, but there's he talks about like Steve Jobs and and they were born, 7 months apart and just happened to hit, when computers were like up. And I think there's this broad group now of like digital health entrepreneurs that have some experience, and now's the time. And I think we'll look back and be like, yeah, it was just like lucky time career match.
Love it. Trust your future self. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great expression.
Thanks, man. Love
Hey,
it.
thank you guys.
Oh,
Yeah,
over
really fun.
over and out. Cheers.
Bye-bye.